For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dlamini. Author Lauri Kubuitsile discusses her latest historical novel titled But Deliver Us From Evil. Lauri, can you briefly give our viewers an overview of what this novel is about?
Okay. We're calling it, since yesterday, literary historical thriller. Yeah. And it actually stemmed from a letter that I found when I was doing research for my book, The Scattering. And the letter was there used to be a Setswana newspaper that was published at Kuruman, the mission station there, in the late 1800s. And there was a section which was letters to the editor. And there's a book called Mafoko wa Batswana. It's a fantastic book if you can get a hold of it, because it has all the letters over various subjects. One side is in Setswana, one side is in English. And when you read the letters, you really understand that people have always been people. And we complain, and yeah. So there was a letter saying that Kubuitsile the first, he was a very big missionary, Christian missionary. He was big friends with Livingstone, and people think maybe he was the best missionary, converted the most Africans to Christianity. I don't know if that's true. But anyway, so somebody wrote a letter saying that Kubuitsile is not a real Christian because at his kotla in Nswing, he executed, I might have the numbers wrong now because I didn't bring my notes with me, but I think it was, he executed 25 witches. And then, and because witchcraft is not part of Christianity, then obviously he's not a Christian. Yeah. And so then after some time, Kubuitsile himself wrote a letter back to that. And then he said that, in fact, he didn't execute 25 witches.
Only 5.
I think it's 9. Is it 5? Yeah. I know in here that there are fewer, but I think it was 9 or 7. And he said, and they were known witches. So, what is there to discuss? And in that letter, he mentioned that the 25 were accused by a girl who was living in the mission house. She was the daughter to the maid. So I found this letter when I was doing the research for The Scattering. And I just kept on thinking in my mind, what is the story of that girl? And the way history is, I mean, the history that we're given in school, I keep on saying this, I've been saying it since Front and Shirt, but it's like, we're given it as facts, isn't it? But I think we're realizing now that it's a narrative, and it's a narrative of the victors. And so anybody who's not, in most cases, white and male, their story falls between the cracks. And so I knew I'm never going to find the story of this young black girl in the mission house. So that's how the book came to be. So there's actually 2 girls. The other one is Beatrice, and they come together in Nswing, and there's a lot of things happening, a lot of power struggles, and they get caught up in that.
In the book, there's this interesting character named Nthebolang. Where did the inspiration for her come from?
Yeah, her father is, well, I think we can all assume when we read the book, wrongly accused of being a witch. I read an academic paper, I think it's Isaac Shapiro, about, he looked at witchcraft cases in Botswana over quite a long period of time. And almost all of them were just straight poisoning. Yeah. So I think that he goes to the cattle post with the medicine that was given to him by his old man and for the cattle. And somehow, I mean, we don't know really till the end, not to give things away, but what the real struggles that were actually happening there. But yeah, he was sort of set up and kills his brother, and then the family loses all their cattle. And if you were accused of being a witch or associated with a witch, it meant now your house had to be burnt down. So now Nthebolang and her mother had nowhere to go. They just had to leave. That's how they arrive in Nswing.
And witchcraft must have been considered a serious offense back then, because we saw that their family and relatives, they turned their backs on them and they had to leave. Can you tell us about this practice and why it features so prominently in this book?
Well, I'm not an expert on it. I did research, of course, for the novel. I think for me, it's not so much about the witchcraft per se. I think my questions when I was writing the book were more about spirituality and you know, this hierarchy of spirituality. Is African traditional religion below Christianity with like the missionary? So that's why even the title, I think, Deliver Us from Evil, it's ambiguous. Where is the evil? I mean, people can think, you know, maybe the witches are the evil, but I don't think that's the answer that is pushed on anybody, and I didn't, that wasn't my answer to the question.
And trust as well seems to be a big theme in the book. Tell us about the other themes that tie this book together.
Yeah, I think trust and loyalty is very important in the book. I mean, I think Beatrice is motivated by love and loyalty to her two friends. And she does things, again, that can be considered evil for Kamohelo and also for Nthebolang. And I think, you know, I don't know. I mean, because I think Beatrice is one of, you know, this is my 30th book, so published book I've written for children and teenagers, and so I do think that Beatrice is one of my favorite characters, and maybe one that I really understand better than others, because I do feel sometimes we have to, you know, what is right, you know. Is right what's legal? Is right what, you know, sometimes right, what the morally right thing you have to do goes against the laws, goes against, you know, what other people might think as good. And so, yeah, loyalty and, you know, yeah, love.
Talking about Beatrice, can you tell us briefly about her without giving too much? Yeah, in the book.
You know, Beatrice comes from the Korana, who were living on the islands in the Orange River, Karib. And I find them to be very interesting people. I mean, there are Korana, I mean, people who are anthropologists know that there are Korana that were at the Cape. But I don't think the Korana that were on the island were necessarily only those people, because there was sort of a mixture of people. They were Batlapeng, they were San, they were Griqua, they were Basta, they were Dutch. One of the big captains was Dutch, and he had many wives and many children. And they came together as sort of a mental tribe. They were against colonialism. They wanted freedom. They were really like freedom fighters, and they fought. They came from, you know, the colony. Many of them, there were escaped slaves, others who had worked in the colony and knew how to use guns, were very adept at shooting, very adept at riding horses, and they were really fearless and quite vicious raiders. Like, they'd go into the farms and they would take everything. They would just take everything and even murder the whole family. And at one point, the Northern Cape was really cleared out of farmers. They said, no, we're not going to. And there were two wars. I think it's 1868, 1878, where the colony tried to clear those islands and eventually succeeded. So Beatrice comes from those people. And yeah, I have because I'm speaking about them a lot, so I think you understand that I have a real love for them, the ideology and the idea of them, yeah. And yeah, she comes from them. She gets captured because her father is from the Dutch men who went there, and her mother is San. She looks quite white, and the commando units who come in and arrest most of her people, they think she's been kidnapped, so they take her to a mission station. But her, the whole time, she has an agenda. She has some objectives she must finish. Yeah, and so she allows these things. Well, not always completely compliant, but she does allow these things to happen because she's looking at a long game. Yeah.
This novel is rich in history. Was that the angle that you always wanted to pursue, or was it just a coincidence while you were writing?
Well, you know, when I actually wrote this book quite some time ago, and And I wrote 3 historical novels right in a row. And they all came from the research I did for the scattering. And, you know, as a writer, I think, you know, you can hear a lot of stories. I mean, I don't really understand people who find that they have nothing to write about, because stories are getting in my head all the time. But there are stories that won't leave. And then you know that this story needs to be written. And actually, when the scattering is about, again, 2 women. One is a survivor of the German Herero concentration camps. The other one is a survivor of the Second Anglo-Boer concentration camps for the Afrikaner women. And these 2 women again meet in Botswana. In fact, I was at Cape Town Book Fair. And my family, we used to travel a lot to Namibia for camping. It's a very cheap holiday when you have kids and you're not rich. And so I met a woman, Jane Kachevivi. She's from Namibia. She'd just written a very beautiful book called Undisciplined Heart, a memoir. Her husband is Herero. And I said something about, oh no, we love Namibia, and we're just from Lüderitz. We were camping on Shark Island. And then Jane said to me, but how, you know, do you know the history of that place? And I said, no. And she said, that was a concentration camp. Thousands of Herero and Nama people died on that island. And now it's a campground, you know? And I felt so embarrassed at my ignorance. And especially because I live in a village. Mahalapi is where the Herero moved from Namibia, the chief, Kosi Maharero. He brought the people to Mahalapi, to my village. I know many Herero people. And so I felt, you know, that's horrible. How do I not know this history? So when I went back to Mahalapi, I just wanted to learn the history for myself. Because by that time I was just, you know, I was writing young adult fiction, I was writing for kids, I was writing romance, detective, not anything big. And so when I started doing the research, I thought, I never thought of a book. And then even when I started to get a story of Shipuka and Ruhapu, I really did feel that this is a book that's really very above my weight class. I'm not that kind of writer. I can't do that research, you know. And so I really went into it I was very hesitant to do it. I didn't think it's for me. But I just did it. And then, so I think historical fiction, yeah, there's a lot of research, and you're never sure that you got everything. You know, you're always, because, you know, there are people who their whole career is about one small thing in history. And so, and you're just writing even this book, it covers quite a wide range of history. So, you know, it's a scary thing to do. Yeah. But anyway, I'm a little bit reckless in my bravery, I think.
Have you had any feedback since the book was published?
This one just came out, so very few people have read it. Last night we had a book launch in Melville at Book Circle Capital. And I know because the 2 people who were interviewing me was Karabo Koling and Yewande Umotoso. And Karabo, I know when she finished the book, she sent me a message, and she just said, wow, I wish this could become a movie, she said. So I think that, I mean, she liked it.
That's good.
But we'll see, it's just new now, so it just came out.
So what kind of conversations are you hoping people will take away after they've read the book?
I mean, I do think we need to have conversations about religion. I don't like this, you know, I'm not a religious person, but I am a spiritual person. And I don't like religions being, you know, this one is not okay, this one is okay. And you do find that in, you know, you'll find people like in Botswana who are very devout Christians, and they won't mention that, you know, of course they go to traditional doctors, you know, it's just how it is, that's how people do. And it's like you're supposed to hide that part or something. So I would like discussions about, about religion and spirituality, but also I think, you know, women in history, I think more and more that's something that's very important. And I wish that more people would pull those stories out. I keep on saying, because I really, really like Kubuitsile the First. He's such an interesting character, and I'm very, you know, when I'm doing research, I go off on tangents forever that have nothing to do with the book, and I did that with him. I did a lot of research about him because he's very fascinating, and I think, you know, by that time, Southern Africa was much more integrated than it is now, and he was really a very important leader of the time, and he hasn't been given his rightful place in history at all. And he was there was chieftainship problem. His father died when he was still a young boy, and then his uncle, I think it's his uncle, took over, and him and his mother were banished, and they moved all around Southern Africa. They were poor, begging from people and stuff, and then at one point Mzilikazi kidnapped them and took them to, you know, what's now Zimbabwe, and they became very good friends. You know, I mean, it's just history that we never hear, you know. And I wish somebody, I keep telling other writers, like, please can you write this book? Please can you write this book? Because I think I might be done with historical fiction, I don't know. Past someone else, please do this, because it has to be written. Even if it's written as a novel. Because again, sometimes you can't get all the information. But, you know, sometimes you know this thing happened, you know this thing happened. That's there in the record. So it's the in-between that you have to use your imagination to
come
connect.
up with the storyline.
Using human nature, the way we behave. So, yeah.
Thank you. That was author Lauri Kubuitsile speaking to Crema Media's Polity about her novel titled But Deliver Us from Evil.